Good morning. Good morning. Please rise as you are able and join us singing our spirit music, number 301, Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky.
Opening words are from Reverend John Hassler Dietrich. Unitarianism is an attitude of mind rather than a form of doctrine. It is that receptive attitude of mind which throws itself open to all progress in human thought with only one aim, the discovery of that which is real and true. Therefore, no one becomes a Unitarian or ceases to be a Unitarian because of any belief or opinion they may hold. One only becomes a Unitarian when he or she has the proper attitude toward truth, and ceases to be one when they lose this attitude, no matter how much they believe or disbelieve.
Good morning, and welcome to the Universalist Unitarian Church of Farmington. My name is Susan Leitner, and I want to speak to the Sunday Service Committee, who is always recruiting and looking for new ushers. If you have never been an usher, it is a wonderful way to meet people, to greet people, start your morning with a smile, and also make a contribution to the church that does not require meetings or evenings. It is get here in the morning, greet everyone, say hello, and then church starts. So I invite you to talk to Julia Petro, who will wave her hand after the service if you would like to find out about being an usher. Our minister, the Reverend Leonetta Boulesi, is out of the pulpit today, and we have a special speaker we have heard from many times with the wonderful sermons, Paul Bailey, and I'll tell you more about him later on. I'd like to extend a special welcome to any visitors today. Please join us after the service for coffee, conversation, meeting each other. A member of the membership committee will be at our visitors table that is just inside Adams Hall downstairs if you have any questions. At this time, I'd like to invite any brave new visitors here for the first time to stand if you wish and let us know where you are from and how you heard about us. We would like to meet you.
Hi, I'm Laura Bush. This is Megan's here, my son Casey, and this is Forrest. And I've been here before, but it's been quite a while.
We're glad to have you with us this morning. During the service, we have supervised nursery for babies and toddlers and religious education classes for children and youth. Please see Natalie Case, our religious education coordinator, for more information about these programs. If you happen to need to leave the service for any reason, cough, tickle in the throat, or whatever, there are 2 other locations in the building where the service is broadcast, and an usher can direct you to them. We are a welcoming congregation, and we welcome all humans, regardless of race, sexual orientation, belief system, and age, even small children that are fidgety and make noises, or older people that make noises and are fidgety. The little humans especially are our future, and we welcome them while they are in our meeting house. I did not see any announcements, but Gloria would like to come up and make an announcement from Social Justice Committee.
Very briefly, want to tell you that you have a great opportunity to sign up to help at Gleaners. Anyone, that's March 3rd from 9 to 11:30. We will be carpooling from here. Anyone 10 and older is invited to help. Sign up is downstairs. Thank you.
Just a quick announcement too, that the RE program is growing in numbers, which is fantastic, but that also means that we need more volunteers. So there is a sign-up sheet posted downstairs, correct, on the bulletin board, and so there's lots of open spots there. So if you would consider to sign up for 1 or more Sundays to spend with these awesome, they're all dudes today, right? These awesome little dudes, that would be wonderful. Thanks.
There are also many announcements in your order of service. Please take a moment after the service or take it home with you so you have a record of what's going on in the church and will be able to participate. A good time now to silence your phones other little devices you might have with you if you haven't done it already. And if you would join me in reading the Litany of Gathering that is on page 3 in your order of service. This is our sacred time and place. We gather in community to renew our spirits, to explore the mystery, and to share our joys and sorrows. With you, I find strength.
Together we become bound by love and respect.
With me, you can share your deepest self.
Together we learn to understand and to forgive.
We share triumphs.
And they inspire.
We share failures.
And we share our human nature.
We share joy.
And it multiplies.
We share sorrow.
And it begins to lessen.
Please come forward to share whatever joys or sorrows of a personal nature you wish to share this morning, and light a candle if you wish.
Good morning. I'm Beverly Mannheimer, and I had the pleasure yesterday of 3 charming women who came to visit me, and they were daughters of a very dear friend of mine that I worked with many years ago at the phone company. And we visited all afternoon, and Panera, we ordered food from Panera, and they're delivering now. So they delivered our lunch, and it was just great to visit with them. And we're going to have a reunion in the spring, and we're going to a nature center. But it was so good to be with the young ladies. They were only, well, young, they were 65, but they're still young compared to me. But it was just wonderful to relive a lot of my past. It was through their mother and father that I met Gus, and we had 50 years together. Thank you.
Gloria Tweedy and Bob, who is not here, but we have wonderful news. Our daughter, who is an OBGYN, passed her second set of boards. Woo-hoo! That means perhaps the next time we go in, she won't be in so much stress.
I'm Maggie Whitehead. Hi again. Unfortunately, I have a sorrow. I'm going to light a candle for my cousin Abby, who this week her fiance died unexpectedly. He was only 28, and they had a 1-year-old and a 7-year-old daughter. So it's just a really terrible situation all around, and I just feel heartbroken for them. So I'm going to light a candle for them.
I'm Barbara Windsor. Next Sunday, my sister, Margaret Whiting, will be bringing me to church, and you get to hear her sing. She sings much better than I do.
Could you light a candle? We light this candle for the unspoken joys and sorrows among us. Thank you. And now if you would rise as you are able and sing our next hymn, number 118, This Little Light of Mine.
Yes.
And it's time for the children's chalice lighting and message for all ages. Natalie?
Good morning. I thought that this morning we could do a little mind experiment. Are you guys ready for a mind experiment? Use our brains and our imaginations. So I want to see if all together in 10 seconds we can make everybody in this room a little bit happier. So here's how I propose we do it. I'll give you the instructions for the experiment, and then we're going to actually perform the experiment, okay? So it goes like this. You think of two people, and they need to be two people in this room. So it could be your mom, your dad, your brother, or your sister, or anybody here in our church family. So you think of two people, and you take the first person and you bring them up in your head, and you think, I want you to be happy. And then you bring up the second person and you hold them right there in your head, and you think, I want you to be happy. So each of us is going to do that individually, all together, and we'll see if in 10 seconds we can make everybody in the room feel a little bit happier. So we're going to do it, and then we'll see if we feel happier ourselves. You guys want to try? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to count down 10 seconds in my head, and during those 10 seconds, all of us are going to do it together, okay? All right, are you ready? 1, 2, 3, go. That was 10 seconds. Who feels happier? I feel happier. We did it! Experiment is successful. And now we're off to children's church.
On page 5 in your order of service, would you please join me with the words of offering? We give generously to support this church where love, justice, and equality inspire our acts of service and compassion. We dedicate these gifts to all that we stand for within the Unitarian Universalist tradition.
The reading is from a sermon by John Dietrich, The Road to Tolerance. Intolerance is a chronic malady of human life which breaks out at times when something in man's environment stimulates or inflames his intolerant tendency. When the conditions which bring about these forms of intolerance are removed, the hysteria subsides, but the occasional outbreaks are proofs of the universal presence of the malady. I would suggest a few things that might contribute to a greater tolerance within our own nature and thus ease up the situation. The first thing I would suggest is knowledge. If intolerance is born of fear, it is conceived of ignorance. 9/10 of the intolerance in race prejudice, religious bigotry, and social snobbery is due to our inability to understand and thus to put ourselves in the place of others who have a different racial, social, and religious heritage and tradition. The ignorant man fills the future with all kinds of threatening forms because he does not know the past or the actual conditions of the present. When someone tells him that these things do not exist and that the means which he uses to avoid them are unnecessary, he feels that his future and that of the world is endangered. And so the first cure of intolerance is education. How different is the man who has opened his mind and let in the light, the man who seeks to learn all that life has to offer with no case to defend. And as his knowledge increases, he becomes conscious of his limitations as measured against the background of infinity. Another thing that will help us to be more tolerant is a faith in truth and its ability to prevail. The intolerance of people is a standing witness to their lack of faith in themselves and to the ideas which they hold. They are afraid to let their opponents speak, lest everything they stand for goes to pieces. The ignorant person lives in a very narrow world. He is familiar only with a single set of ideas, those which have been handed down to him by his parents and rigidly taught at home and church. And these ideas he fondly imagines are the correct ones upon which the very structure of society rests. When he encounters an idea which is the opposite of these, he imagines society or religion is tumbling to pieces. The educated man lives in a growing and expanding world and has no such illusions about the correctness of traditional ideas. By this fact, he is able to put himself in the other man's place and feel that if he had been born in the same circumstances, he would probably hold those same ideas. Thus, he becomes tolerant. The degree of his tolerance is usually measured by the extent of his knowledge. Fear, as the basis of all intolerance, is born of ignorance. 9/10 of the things which people fear do not exist. To respect a person is to respect everything they say and do. We may not approve of what they say or do, but we understand. And behind every wrong opinion and evil deed, we see the person whose life is as our own and who, for some good reason, indulges in error and persists in evil. The word respect sums it all up. We shall be patient, kind, and tolerant if we but understand and respect one another. Such understanding and respect makes one's attitude all-inclusive, as expressed by Edwin Markham. He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flaunt, but love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in.
We will now have a moment of silence for prayer, meditation, and quiet, followed by a musical interlude. For our presentation this morning, I'm pleased to welcome once again Paul Bailey, a longtime member of the church and a Chrysler retiree, to our pulpit for his very interesting presentations. Paul and his wife Nancy live in Garden City with 5 cats.
First, I'd like to apologize for my voice. I'm getting over a cold. I'd like to thank the Sunday Services Committee for the opportunity to speak today. It is indeed an honor. John Dietrich was among the first Unitarian ministers to boldly preach that humanist thinking was the true foundation of religious humanism. His addresses, which were heard and read by thousands, so popularized religious humanism that it has now become a significant element in Unitarian Universalism. John Dietrich was born to a farming family of German-Swiss descent in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, January 14, 1878. He was inquisitive and a perfectionist. His parents, Sarah and Jerome Dietrich, had little education, were hard-working sharecroppers and devout members of the Reformed Church. When John was 15, the family moved to the community of Marx. He went to Mercersburg Academy, a preparatory school 4 miles away. Having successfully completed the 4-year course in 3 years, he was selected class valedictorian. The following summer, Dietrich worked for the New York Tribune Fresh Air Fund in the New York City slums. The money he earned helped him study at Franklin and Marshall College in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. His goal was to become a Reformed church minister. He became a private secretary to millionaire Jonathan Thorne, an Episcopalian of New York City, who also attended a Unitarian church to listen to the leading Unitarian minister of the time, Minot J. Savage. John joined him and developed an interest in Savage and Unitarianism. While at college, he became friends with Albert C. Diefenbach, who was studying at the Reformed Church's Eastern Theological Seminary, also in Lancaster. Diefenbach later became a Unitarian minister and editor of the Christian Register, later the Unitarian Register. To earn money to pay for his ministerial education, John taught mathematics and Latin at his old academy, then taught 1 year at the Nyack Military Academy. He studied at the Eastern Theological Seminary and was ordained in 1905 by the Pittsburgh Synod and became the minister of St. Mark's Reformed Church in Pittsburgh. He was a popular preacher, and attendance soon tripled and church membership doubled. He upset some of the largest contributors when he modernized the order of worship and introduced a new hymn book edited by a Unitarian. Although a majority of the church members stood by their minister, the situation continued to worsen, and he ultimately resigned. At the behest of the Orthodox ministers of the Allegheny classis of the Reformed Church, he was charged with heresy for denying, among other things, the virgin birth, the deity of Jesus, and the infallibility of the Bible. A trial was scheduled but not held because Dietrich refused to defend himself, knowing it wouldn't change the outcome. As a result, in 1911, he was defrocked. John said, "The charge that I have been untrue to my ordination vows, I confess that I have been. Not, however, because of any traitorous inclinations in my character, but because I have read and studied and discovered much truth since those vows were taken, and I would rather be untrue to a vow than untrue to the highest truth revealed to me." A factor behind the charges was John's enormous popularity among members of other churches. His sermons were drawing attendees away from other congregations, which made him unpopular among other ministers. He had also learned that while the teaching of liberal ideas was permissible in theological school, these same ideas must be securely locked up or tossed away on the student's entrance into the active sphere of the church. A group of Presbyterian ministers told Dietrich they admired his courage. They believed as he did, but they had been warned that to preach such doctrines was to lay their heads upon the block. The church could not afford to recognize the teachings of science to that extent. Dietrich told them that he admired their courage and considered it easier to be at war with the world than to be at war with himself. To preach against one's honest convictions must be a difficult matter. Walter Mason, minister of the First Unitarian Church in Pittsburgh, was impressed with Dietrich and recommended to the American Unitarian Association that they welcome him into the Unitarian ministry. In 1911, Dietrich moved to Spokane, Washington, as minister of the First Unitarian Society. The church had less than 60 members and a building which needed a major overhaul. When he left 5 years later, the church had over 1,500 members and gathered in a new structure, the Clemmer Theater. In a 1915 sermon, The Right to Be Well Born, Dietrich defended Margaret Sanger and birth control. Margaret Sanger had started her crusade in 1914 alone and with no money. The Unitarian Church was the first church to support her, but not until 16 years later in 1930. But Dietrich supported her just months after she got started, and he even had her speak at his church. One of the women in the church asked if she might take charge of selling Margaret Sanger's pamphlet on contraceptives. Dietrich consented, and within a couple weeks the pamphlets were on sale in the lobby of the Clemmer Theater after the Sunday service. There was horror on the part of some of Spokane's more sensitive inhabitants. Betty Graham, a member of the Spokane Review, asked for an interview with Dietrich. The next evening in her paper was the headline, "Who is this man Dietrich? Who is this troublemaker that everybody is wrangling about? What does he mean by coming here and stirring us out of our sophoric calm? Doesn't he know we have been vegetating for nigh on 20 years? How dare he come here and put us to trouble of thinking, and on a Sunday too? Mr. Dietrich doesn't look like a dangerous man, and yet I have heard him denounced in a way that made me look carefully for the cloven hoof. But neither in his person, his speech, nor his philosophy could I find a sign of it. Mr. Dietrich is absolutely sincere in his effort to put his ideas before the people who want something to think about. He is a reformer and a clear and logical thinker, a six-cylinder talker, and he has got the punch. That is why everybody is talking about him. In 1916, Dietrich reluctantly left Spokane for the First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, 150 members, where he would be better able to promote humanism. His ministry at Minneapolis was one of the truly great ministries of the Unitarian movement. By 1918, in order to accommodate everyone, between 1,500 and 1,900, the congregation had to hold services in the Garrick Theater. In a second sermon on birth control, The Ethics of Birth Control, Dietrich said, "The method of controlling birth by the means of contraception has long been practiced by well-informed people, usually by those who argue most vehemently against it. Contraception information is available to those who need it least and kept from those who are in dreadful need of it. The movement began by Mrs. Sanger was started to relieve the women of the poorer classes from the tremendous suffering which resulted from almost constant and unwanted pregnancy. Women would rather risk their lives through abortion, 250,000 a year at that time, than give birth to babies they could not feed and care for. Most of these women had more than 10 children. According to Sanger, in Physical Culture magazine, April 1917, 300,000 babies under 1 year of age died in the United States each year from poverty and neglect. Dietrich said the greatest opposition to birth control is found within the Catholic Church. Their position is God sent children, and hence all must be welcome, no matter what the conditions that await them in the home. Even though most of them died as infants, they could still be used to populate heaven or hell, according to whether or not the sacrament of baptism had been performed. The major argument against birth control is that such information could be abused, that it would encourage immorality. Dietrich said that is no reason for keeping people ignorant. It is much better to give them the knowledge and train them how to use it. All privileges and human benefits are abused, but the good derived from them far outweighs their abuses. The evils resulting from knowledge can never equal the evils of ignorance. On August 25, 1912, Dietrich married Louise Erb, whom he had met when returning from a 1910 European tour. They had 2 sons. She died of cancer in 1931. In 1933, he married writer and poet Margaret Winston, a widow with 3 children. In 1942, Margaret published an account of his life, This Circle of Earth. The role of the church, Dietrich felt, was to teach. Therefore, the minister's chief responsibility was the weekly sermon. His sermons became hour-long addresses, preceded by readings and music. He insisted that he would never try to impose his religious approach upon the congregation. I shall rather try to stimulate and guide you in your thinking, that you may work out your own conceptions of religion and morality. In 1917, Dietrich met Curtis Reese, a Midwestern Unitarian minister who was advancing similar humanistic ideals. The one difference was that Dietrich never rejected theism, he merely found no evidence for God. Working together, each with his own skills and abilities, they enlarged the philosophical base of the Unitarian movement. Reese published books on the new interpretation of religion. Dietrich produced instead a series of widely read addresses. The majority of these were distributed by his society as the Humanist Pulpit, 1917 to 1934. Subscriptions for his sermons, together with the sale of individual pamphlets, grew to such an extent that 5,000 copies of each address were distributed. These lectures were so eagerly sought out that they went into every state and almost every country in the world. As a result of the teachings and work of these 2 pioneers, Unitarian ministers and churches, and to a lesser extent Universalists, debated theism versus humanism. It was a discussion that still occupies the attention of UUs today. It reached its first watershed in 1921 when Dietrich and Dr. William Sullivan, a former Roman Catholic priest who had converted to the Unitarian ministry and was a fiery theist, debated the topic. Dietrich was already scheduled to speak at the General Unitarian Conference, which included the Unitarian churches of Canada and the United States. The subject given the speakers to discuss was the faith that is in us. Through his eloquence and ability, Dr. Sullivan said he would hold aloft the banner of theism and rout the upstart. It was October 1921 in Detroit, Michigan. The large Jewish temple which housed the General Conference was jammed. Dietrich spoke first. What does the Unitarian movement stand for? What is the common faith that is in us? And a result of this faith, what is our duty to the world? This grand faith, which must be the strength of humanity, the popular religion has not given us, and apparently has no intention of giving us. Its dream of a perfect social order has its accomplishment somewhere else, and has no relation whatever to the actual order in which we now live. Therefore must come with passion and with enthusiasm our Unitarian religion, which has held this faith from the days of Channing down to the present time. Not preaching acquiescence and submission to the present order, but holding up in contrast to what we see about us, an error in which reigns perfect peace, perfect justice, and perfect goodwill, and declaring unto men that in this idea alone is there any sacredness and authority. This is the faith that the world needs today. It does not need an ecclesiastical religion. It does not need more prayers and holy books. It does not need literary essays on academic subjects. While others continue to preach creed and class and caste and the many things which drive men apart, we have faith to believe that men and nations can come to live for the good of humanity as well as for their own welfare. The kind of world we live in depends not upon some God outside of man, but upon man himself. Or as some of us would put it, upon the God that dwells in humanity. The character of people's life upon this planet depends not upon divine intervention, nor upon prayer, but upon what we ourselves are and what we ourselves do. This does not mean that a rational conception of God is ruled out of life. It simply means that the emphasis is changed, and with that emphasis is changed the responsibility and duty of man. Once we transfer men's efforts from seeking help from heaven, whence no help comes, to a firm and confident reliance upon ourselves, the progress of humanity toward an era of peace and happiness is assured. The applause broke. Enthusiasm for the speaker and his right to express his convictions ran high. Dr. Sullivan rose. He was aghast at this license to tolerance and liberty. He became personal in his attacks upon Dietrich. He finished sweating and exhausted. He had fought hard and bitterly, with consequent loss to himself and to his prestige in the Unitarian Church. The prevailing opinion of the audience, even of the majority of theistic ministers, was that Dietrich had more nearly expressed the spirit of Unitarianism than Dr. Sullivan. The majority were surprised and disgusted with Sullivan's unsportsmanlike manner and his vicious attack upon Dietrich. They compared it with the latter's humility and tolerance. He was speaking only for himself, as no Unitarian could speak other than for himself. In Dietrich's October 10, 1926 sermon, The Significance of the Unitarian Movement, he said, "Our mission is to demonstrate to the world that nothing is so sacred as the truth, nothing so divine as liberty. We believe that people will be more likely to find the truth if they are free to search for it than if they are threatened or frightened, or if they are compelled to come to some preordained conclusions that have been settled for them. Freedom, then, for the sake of finding the truth. This is the fundamental principle of Unitarianism. We must proclaim to people everywhere that here in our Unitarian fold is a place where they may follow truth to its uttermost bounds and still enjoy the privileges of religious fellowship. All we ask is that they come with open minds, loving hearts, helping hands, and the spirit of goodwill. Working together, relying upon our own hard work, Not upon magical intervention of a supreme being, we can remove mountains, for it is not faith in dogmas and creeds that the world demands today. It is faith in oneself and in one's fellow. There is no need for salvation from a hell which does not exist. There is a kind of humanism salvation in that by reason and education, one frees oneself from animal instincts and passions and superstitious beliefs and fears to fulfill the best in ourselves in our only life and world. Dietrich wasn't offended by the word God as some humanists are. He just didn't think it relevant. From his sermon, The Problems of Public Worship in Unitarianism, he said, "As I look forward in the future, I seem to see the dim outlines of a human church where all people come together and worship in diversity of thought, but in unity of spirit. With such thinking, they will fully realize that the controlling spirit of the world is not something outside of us, but something within us, manifesting itself in the action of people, and their ritual will formulate itself around this thought. They will come, not as of old, to sing the praise of and glory of some being in the sky, but to express their admiration of great deeds and noble people." As Dietrich put it, our sojourn here becomes a wonder-awakening romance, a pilgrimage through mysteries and marvels, and as we walk together, comforting each other, loving each other, helping each other, our hearts burn within us. For those who still think there is something missing from humanism, he told members, humanism robs us of nothing that actually exists. Historian Dr. Mason Olds said, Dietrich's personal theology evolved to a humanism so radical it took Unitarians years to decide whether they were sufficiently liberal to contain it. In 1933, Meadville Theological School honored Dietrich's contributions to Unitarian thinking by conferring upon him a Doctor of Divinity degree. Few of his congregation ever learned of this degree. The letters D.D. were not written after his name. What I like most about Dietrich, he never lacked the courage to tackle the most controversial issues. What I think you will like, he never tried to impose his religious approach on members. He tried to stimulate and guide them in their thinking so that they would work out their own conceptions of religion and morality. Many people have written about humanism, but none presented ideas on so many subjects: humanism, religion, theism, ethics, morality, families, individuals, sex, science, natural law, evolution, politics, war, death, God, Satan, and all forms of human welfare. In 1941, Dietrich retired. He and his wife went to Berkeley, California, and he occasionally preached. He didn't care to be addressed as minister, preacher, or reverend. He preferred teacher. Teacher John Hassler Dietrich died July 22, 1957, after a long battle with cancer. Thank you very much.
If you could rise as you are able, and please join us with our last hymn, number 95, There is More Love Somewhere.
some outside power that will achieve the progress of humanity is shattered forever. That perfect order of things, which for centuries men believed God was to produce for us in another world, we ourselves must produce